I'm Mike Slater, host of the podcast Politics by Faith. Coming up in just a minute here, we're going to talk to the great Mike Baker from the President's Daily Brief, because we got a lot going on with Iran and Israel. A lot of concerns and valid concerns, right? Will this be a forever war? Why is this our business at all? What does this have to do with America first? I thought we were all America first. Now we're getting involved in foreign wars. Well, we're told that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Why not? Pakistan has nuclear weapons, right? Let's say Iran did get one. What does that mean? Okay, well, let's say we stop them from getting one. Let's say there actually is a regime change out of all this. What kind of destabilization will that cause in the Middle East? And what's the effect of that going to be? These are big questions. These are important questions that we're going to ask Mike Baker about coming up here in just a minute. But if I may add just one thing here for a moment, this observation. Israel intelligence and what they've been able to accomplish these last few years, there's never been anything like it in the world. And not only is it so targeted and so effective, like the leaders of the the leaders of the Iranian military are dead, like that effective. But it is so demoralizing to the enemy. That's the hope I have, that this will not go on for long, because what's Iran going to do? You can't turn around. Here's what I mean. Think about just a couple months ago, it was last September, what they did to Hezbollah. Actually, no, let's go back a little further than that. Let's go back to 2021. All right, here's a little story for you. Israel has been tracking the top nuclear scientist in Iran for a long time. And Iran has been protecting this guy as max as they possibly could. Everywhere he went, total protection, 7 vehicles in his entourage, changing routes every day. They did everything they could to confuse Israel, prevent any attacks against this top nuclear scientist. And they were on the lookout for every type of assassination plan or plot that Israel could possibly conceive of, right? And one of the plans Israel has, they're like, hey, what if we detonated a bomb on the road that this guy's caravan's on, and then when he stops, we can open fire and we'll kill him. And they're like, that's too much gunfire. We don't want this massive shootout. Let's not do that. So what they came up with was remote-controlled, AI-powered machine gun. Which is like, what are you talking about? So here's what Israel did. They made this machine gun in a robot. The whole thing together weighed about a ton. And they broke it down into a million different pieces and smuggled them all into Iran, and then reassembled it in Iran. And they put it in the back of a pickup truck. The truck was also packed with a bunch of explosives so they could blow it up after the operation was over. And the plan was, when the guy's caravan, this top nuclear scientist in Iran, when his caravan drives by, we're gonna fire the machine gun remotely, and we're gonna kill him. Now, we got a couple problems with that, a couple technical problems. And this is why I wanna share this. This is high-tech stuff. So first off, the truck is gonna shake when we fire the gun. That's gonna affect our shots. Also, the satellite data is gonna be delayed, about 1.6 seconds. So what we're seeing on camera, when we see it in Israel, that happened 1.6 seconds ago. Also, we gotta hit a moving target. We gotta hit a moving target with a delay in a shaking truck. How are we gonna do that? Well, they came up with an AI program to compensate for all those variables. Fasten this machine to the back of the truck and was waiting for the truck to go by. Now, they also had to make sure that in the car was just him. They didn't want his wife or kids in the car. How are we gonna do that? Well, they didn't want to use a drone because obviously they would see it. So they put a fake disabled car on the side of the road with a camera in it. So when the caravan went by, the camera could tell which car he was in and that he was alone in it. His wife, his kids weren't in it. And it was just a couple minutes later, he went down the street, machine gun fired, 15 bullets, killed him. That was the end. So you have that high-tech mission. Also, Israel hacking into cell phones, remotely hacking into cameras, spying on Hezbollah. You had all of Iran and their proxies saying, Israel is going high-tech, we need to go low-tech, right? If Israel is gonna hack into our cameras and our phones, and they're gonna geolocate us, and they're gonna give us all this spyware, and they're gonna kill us with AI-powered machine guns on the side of the road, we have to go low-tech. So that's when Hezbollah started using beepers, right? Beepers don't have geolocation on them, right? We're gonna go low-tech. So what did Israel do? They started a company in Hungary, BAC Consulting, that was under contract to produce pagers on behalf of a Taiwanese company called Gold Apollo. All of it was fake. Every last bit of it was fake. There were at least 2 other shell companies that were created to mask that this was actually an Israeli intelligence operation. Now, BAC, they consulting, they did make pagers for other clients too. And then they somehow, I don't know how this happened, somehow they landed the deal. They landed the contract to make the pagers for Hezbollah. And then those were packed with explosives. So those were a little different than the other ones that they would mail out. So those pagers for Hezbollah had explosives in them. And they shipped them to Lebanon in 2022. Thousands of pagers into Lebanon. And they had to wait. They didn't have to wait, but they did. They waited for years until the order was given to activate the pagers. And at the exact same moment, thousands of pagers went off. And people, boop, boop, boop. And people, I don't know what pagers do. I think they beep, I guess, right? I remember. Right? But they beep, beep, and they take it out, and just a few seconds after that, it explodes. People's hands were blown off. Men's groins exploded. The video of people on motorcycles just blown off the motorcycle. Can you imagine the mass panic that would cause across the country? At least 12 people died. 2,700 people were wounded. And the benefit of that is now we know who the Hezbollah members are because they don't have a hand. So then Hezbollah's freaking out. They're like, no more pagers, no more pagers. Use walkie-talkies. And then the next day, all the walkie-talkies started exploding. So think for a second, if you're a member of that group, right? You're a member of that group and they got you everywhere. You are totally surrounded. You are going to call it quits. You can't move. You're afraid to use the toaster. You're afraid to use an alarm clock. That's what Israeli intelligence has been able to accomplish. Years and years of planning and execution and patience. And then here last week, they were able to kill all the top generals, all the military leaders in Iran at the same moment. 7 top nuclear scientists all at once. How is it possible? Incredible. These aren't mass bombings across Tehran. And maybe we'll get some people that are important and we'll kill a bunch of soldiers. Maybe some, no. This is like, oh, we're going to kill the 4 highest ranking members of the military. And that's it. Unbelievable. Then you had the story of Israel. The top Hamas leader, this was last July, went to a safe house in Tehran. And there was a bomb that Israel placed in the mattress of that guy's bed in the safe house. That would be like if one of our enemies put a bomb inside the mattress of Trump's bed at Camp David. Like, what are you talking about? And then the video we've all seen now of Iranian state TV, just in the theme of demoralizing people, or the leadership at least. Maybe we'll see if it excites the people. But definitely demoralizing the leadership, where you got Iranian state TV, where the woman's on there, I don't know what she's saying, but she's upset about something. And then Israel bombed the state TV operation. They're like, oh man, like you're watching that, or you're the leadership. You're like, we can't do anything. Totally demoralizing. People know, you would think people would know that the leadership doesn't have their physical grip that they used to have on me. If you were in Iran, if you're in Iran, you're like, oh wow, like the leadership is definitely losing power. And we'll see if people realize it. We'll see if the Iranian leadership has the psychological hold over people like they've had for a long time. We'll see how the people of Iran respond. Israel also has full operational control over Iranian airspace after knocking out their air defense systems. And it seems like if their supreme leader wants to live, he's got to give up. Amazing. Incredible precision of attacks that I don't think has ever been done before in history. The accuracy of it, the patience needed to make it happen, just remarkable. And not only is it deadly, but just demoralizing for the enemy. All that being said, let's bring in the great Mike Baker. Mike, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much, man. I appreciate it.
Good to talk to you. Let's start with what I think is the most foundational question of it all. President Trump keeps saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And the White House issued this article 56 times that the president has said that. I think the earliest was back in 2011. So I'll bring it to you. Why can Iran not have a nuclear weapon?
Yeah. First of all, I thought your most foundational question was going to be where I got this wallpaper from behind me. But other than that, I'm on the road. So I'm actually at the guest bedroom of the Queen's Buckingham Palace. We're not. Look, the reason is simply because you're dealing with a fundamentalist, zealous regime, right? This is not like dealing with even North Korea. Even with Kim Jong Un, you can look and say, okay, in an own sense, he understands the threat of mutual destruction, right? He understands that, and that will be a hold, even as bizarre as Kim Jong Un is. And that's always, of course, what was kind of foundational for our dealings during the Cold War with the Soviet Union was this idea of mutual destruction. The problem with the Iranian regime is that's not how they think, right? This is a different cat. And so, as the Israelis have said, when they have said for decades that their goal is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, to destroy the country, remove them from the map, then you should probably take them at their word, because everything they've been doing for years has been geared towards that, whether it's directly from their own regime or whether it's from all the proxies that they've spent all these years building and training and resourcing and surrounding Israel with.
So, I mean, so the question is, do you think they would really use it? Because the other argument would be, well, if they have it, then no one's going to be able to boss them around, and they get to throw their weight around a lot more, because what are you going to do? So there's that, or there's, oh no, they'll actually use it and kill all the Jews in Israel.
Yeah, well, I would hate to be wrong on that question. I mean, I think that the result of getting that wrong is pretty astounding. So, I don't think anybody, can speculate to a great degree about what's in the Ayatollah's head, what's in the IRGC's plans and intentions. But again, they've been working towards this goal of destroying Israel. Once they have a nuclear weapon or weapons, then I think you've got a serious problem, because their goal wouldn't have changed. They wouldn't have decided, now that we have nuclear weapons, we can coexist with Israel. That's naive thinking. And I know that some people in the U.S. would like to be isolationists, non-interventionists. That's all well and good, but not when you're talking about a nuclear holocaust in the Middle East. And the other part of this is, once Iran comes out and says we're a member of the nuke club, then in a sense, you'll get, I don't want to say the dominoes falling, because that's an old trite saying, the domino theory, but you will get the Saudis and others racing to get their own nuclear program established.
Let's talk about the isolationist aspect of this. We're in this MAGA movement, America First. How does this fit in, right? And what do you say to the isolationists who are like, hey, I'm more worried about a place in America here than I am in the Middle East?
Yeah, look, I get it. I understand, I understand the sort of the attraction of saying, America first, and that's the way it should be in a lot of, ways. I mean, that's fine. And we should always be cautious about entering into any conflict overseas, and we should always do it when it's in our own national security interests, right? So that has to be top of mind. So there are times when you could say, no, we don't want to intervene. It's not our place, and it's not what we should be doing for our citizens. But again, when you're talking about something of this magnitude, when you're talking about potential nuclear holocaust in the Middle East, and let's not forget that, just about everything we touch and use, has some component of petroleum in it. And last time I checked, fossil fuels aren't going to be replaced by green energy anytime soon. So things would head south very quickly. We don't live in a bubble anymore. And I know, again, this idea of isolationism, I understand the attraction. But it was more practical 200 years ago, when we were surrounded safely by the oceans and the world wasn't interconnected. We don't have that world anymore.
Yeah. So people are concerned, rightfully, because we've lived through a few of them, these forever wars. And we don't want to get dragged into another forever war. You hear that around a lot. First, I'm speaking out of my role here. I don't even envision a scenario where we have like tanks in Iran. That doesn't even, I'm not there. I mean, is that a possibility at all? Do you see any scenario where that is a thing?
No. I think you're absolutely right. This is not an issue where we're talking boots on the ground, right? We're talking about, look, it's always unpopular, I think, in some circles to say the words regime change, but ultimately that's what the regional actors are hoping for. That's what most of the world would like to see, is for this regime in Iran to go away, and the IRGC to not have their fingers in every aspect of everybody's lives in Iran. So if you put that as the top line objective, whether they say it out loud or not. That's what people are hoping for. And again, including the regional actors. They're not going to say it publicly, but I guarantee you in Saudi and elsewhere, that's why you're not seeing them going out in the streets protesting, what's happening right now between Israel and Iran. So I just have a feeling that, the involvement from the U.S., from our military, would be very specific. It would involve specific munitions, those MOPs, those massive ordnance, penetrators that are needed to hit successfully, places like Fordo and Natanz, the enrichment sites inside of Iran.
Another thing we've been burned on in my lifetime is we'll be greeted as liberators. Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe the people of Iran are different than the people of Iraq and Afghanistan, but I think it makes sense why I think people are like, whoa, hold on. What do we need to know about the people of Iran?
Yeah, well, I think, look, would they like to have more freedom, more chance for success, more, connection to the outside world? Of course they would. Would they like to be told that they've got some civil liberties and freedoms? Maybe go back to the way they were without the Shah, might I add. But I think you always have to be careful. I saw that whole idea of they're going to greet us as liberators back in the very early stages of Iraq, right? And then also to some degree, not as much, but to some degree in Afghanistan. And look, the Iraqis, the Afghans, they never understood what we were trying to sell them, right? But every generation that's engaged in something like that imagines they can do it better. And even though we had the very clear and relatively recent example from when the Soviets occupied Afghanistan, we still thought we could do it better, even when things started to go south for the same reasons that the Soviets faced problems. So you don't want to walk into something like this and imagine that the government that comes in after the current regime, after the mullahs, is going to somehow be massively pro-Western, right? The reality is we don't know what would happen. It could be messy. Oftentimes it is. But is there a good chance that it's better than what we've currently got with the mullahs and the IRGC? Now, the IRGC is very strong. They've got their tentacles into everything. So the unfortunate reality is what comes in behind the mullahs may well be some element of the military. They're going to be very reluctant to give up that revenue and power that they've created after all these years.
Let me ask this broadly. Why do you think President Trump, if this is true, did not give the A-OK to knock out the Ayatollah?
Yeah, that's, of all the executive orders over the years, there's one executive order, 12333, says we don't assassinate foreign leaders. And that's fairly ingrained into every White House, regardless of the administration. Now, not to say that might not happen at some point during this conflict, but I think for a number of reasons, people would be loath to take that on. And I guarantee
I never heard of that. What's the history of that executive order?
What's that?
I'm sorry, what's the history of that executive order? I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's you know what, I'm not a historian. I mean, I know I look really smart, but it only goes so far. But it essentially came up. If I'm not, I may be missing my guess, but I think it came out in the 60s, possibly the early 70s. The idea that we don't target and go after and assassinate world leaders. But the point being is that, look, I think Israel in the early stages of this, meaning the first couple of days of this conflict that's currently going on with Iran, they probably knew exactly where the Ayatollah was. They probably had the opportunity to take him out with a hit, and they opted not to. And there's reason for this. Look, the Iranian people have got to be conflicted, right? There's a large number of them very discontent with the regime, very unhappy with it, right? The economy's a mess. Obviously, for a lot of people, there's no freedoms. But at the same time, they're conflicted, right? Because it's the Israelis that are attacking and potentially leading them towards this regime change. So getting out front and supporting what's happening right now, with the attacks, puts them on the side of Israel, and that's a delicate balance right there, regardless of how they feel about the regime and whether they want them gone. So there's a lot of complexity here.
Yes. What do we need to know about the IRGC you just mentioned?
Yeah, look, they are basically a they're like a mob. They're like the mafia. You remember the IRA? The IRA got started for very legit reasons and then became all about the drugs and money. The IRGC basically went straight to the drugs and money. They went to, how can we have influence and power and control and money? They're in every aspect of that, government and economy. They report directly to Khamenei, to the Ayatollah, but they've suffered over the past 5-6 days. They've suffered enormous losses at the top of their leadership, and because of the way that leadership works, right? It's not like in the U.S. or the U.K. or some other places where you issue commands and then your field commanders and all the way down to your the guys running the squads. They've got real operational leeway, right? They can make decisions on the fly because that's how you need to be. They don't do that in Iran, in that military structure. The issues, the orders come down from Ayatollah Khamenei and they go to the IRGC, and then nobody's going to mess around with the top generals. They tell them to do something, they're not going to question it because they're going to get rewarded for loyalty and caution, not for being creative and independent thinking. So I think they've got some real issues now with their leadership. But look, again, the IRGC is going to be very reluctant to give up power. So if there is a change in the government, then I think what we will likely see is some element of the IRGC playing a role in what happens next.
Interesting. So now I want to ask you what we need to know about Israeli intelligence. We kicked off right before we came on, giving a brief history of what Israel did to the leader of Hamas by putting the bomb in the mattress in the safe house in Tehran, and the remote-controlled machine gun inside Tehran, taking out one of the top Iranian scientists. And then, of course, the Hezbollah beepers. It's like crazy, insane precision. And the point I was trying to make, and please help me out with it, is just demoralizing if you're the enemy. If you're the victims, it's like, I'm afraid to turn on the toaster. How good is Israeli intelligence?
Yeah, it's exceptionally good in that region, right? Because it's their existential threat, right? And so they can be almost singularly focused on Iran and the proxies that Iran has built. And so over the years, they have spent a great deal of time. And look, they also understand, look, they're there, right? It's not like us trying to understand the mindset of the Iranians, right? We're not there. It's very tough for the Westerners. It's the same problem we had in Iraq and Afghanistan. We really have a hard time getting inside their heads and thinking like they do. It's not a problem for the Israelis. They're right there in the middle of it. And so they are exceptional at what they're doing. The ability to carry out some of these strikes has been remarkable. They're human assets, right? They're intel. I mean, look, with the Iranian nuclear program, we've relied heavily on Israeli liaison because their intelligence on what's going on with the nuclear program in Iran is much better than ours. And yeah, the Iranian regime is extremely worried. They just issued instructions to their military and to government and others within the IRGC. Get off your devices. Don't. If you've got a piece of equipment that's linked to the internet, get off of it, right? And so that's also beneficial to the Israelis because now what does that do? That slows down a variety of things, slows down decision making and targeting. So it is remarkable what they've done, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iranian regime. So full marks to them.
Yeah, totally. Last big picture question for you. I've heard for 20 something years that Iran is 12 to 18 months away from a nuclear weapon, or 6 months away, and every once in a while they're a couple weeks away. And it's like, and I brought that up to someone and they said, well, maybe that was true, but that's the reason they don't have one is because there were a lot of interventions from Israel, like over the years, like knocking off this scientist or this computer virus or something to stop them and prevent them from actually having a nuclear weapon. Have you heard of anything that leads anyone to believe that, oh no, they were actually very close this time? And I guess the big picture question of that is, why now? Why is all this coming to a head right now?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot to that question. The why now kind of speaks to why would Israel act on this at this point? Did they have a specific piece of intelligence that said they are 5 days away? Look, what you're talking about in the past, where the estimates for breakout were all over the map, months to years, right? And that just shows you how difficult a lift it is from an intel perspective. But they've got much better intelligence, and that's the thing. Whatever was true 3 months ago doesn't mean it's true now. So, as an example, the DNI Tulsi Gabbard, was standing by an assessment that came out in March, talking about how they're not working their way towards a bomb. They haven't. The Ayatollah hasn't changed his mind. He hasn't rescinded his declaration that we're not going to be pursuing it. Okay, whatever. That's it's naive, and I think it's based on hope and wishful thinking. But it's also 3 months ago, and just in that period of time, the IAEA, which is not a conservative organization, the International Atomic Energy Agency, they said, look, they've gone from 600 pounds, which was the recent estimate just a few months ago, to 900 pounds of 60% plus enriched uranium. Right? And then the lift to get to the weapons grade of 90% is the easy part. It's very tough to get to the 60%. It's easier to get to the 90%. So that's literally a matter of days. And they've been predicting that we think that that breakout window is much more, there's much more consensus over the period of time it would take. So yeah, there's a real problem, but I think why now in part is because the intel showed that they were racing towards faster enrichment. They just opened up another enrichment facility that was discovered. The UN of all organizations, said you have failed to meet your obligations. It's one of the first times they've ever censured them, which is remarkable. And look, also, I think the Israelis feel like there's a unique opportunity here. A year and a half worth of attacking and degrading their proxies means they've destroyed missile supplies from the Houthis, from the Hezbollah, from Hamas. And the Iranians always counted on this overwhelming attack plan. Their strategy was always, let's overwhelm Israeli defenses. And that meant launching missiles from all directions, right? From Lebanon, from Hamas, in Gaza, from Syria. Obviously, Assad's gone now. And so that's gone away, and they've destroyed a number of their stockpiles. So I think they looked at this and thought, okay, now we're dealing with one cat. Now we can do this because they can't overwhelm the degree previously our defenses. Now, the Israelis have to be careful, too. Look, they're running low on interceptors for a couple of their systems, so they have to be concerned about that. But ultimately, I think they just weighed it all out and said, look, if we get another ridiculous agreement with the Iranians, we're literally just putting lipstick on a pig here, right? Because we're going to face the same problem in a year or two. And there was no transparency in that last agreement for inspections. It was imperfect at best. And so the Israelis had no belief that somehow we were going to end up with an agreement with the Iranians that was going to give us 100% transparency, which is what you need in order to ensure that they're not cheating as they have done year after year.
Yeah, great answer.
I sound very cynical.
Final thing? Right. Any final point? Anything I'm missing here? Anything you want to make sure people know about as we proceed, as everything changes every day?
No, actually, that's it. That's the most important thing you've just said. Everything that we've talked about, everything changes every day, right? Nothing stays the same. So, I would just, caution people that, what they want to do is get their news from reliable sources. Don't fall into a social media trap. There's a lot of disinformation being pumped out there, in particular by the Iranian regime, and likely with the support of the Russians. The Russians have not rushed in to provide a lot of support here, in part because they're stretched thin. But the Russians, again, under the theory that nothing happens in a bubble, this is an amazing situation. The Russians are worried about losing Iran as an ally, right? And they just lost Assad in Syria. But you don't see them rushing in to, go on the offensive on Iran's behalf. But they may well be engaged in this disinformation campaign that we've been seeing recently over the past few days. So I would just argue or say that I think people need to, when they're following something like this, make sure you take the time to understand how credible your news sources are.
The President's Daily Brief is one of the most. Mike, great to talk to you, brother. Grateful for you.
Thank you, man. Take care.
On my podcast, Politics by Faith, we take the news of the day and we run it through a biblical filter and first realize that there's nothing new under the sun, and then gain some wisdom on how we should proceed moving forward. We're going to do a proper, complete segment about Iran and Israel and peace. We've all heard the scripture, whether you've heard it like the actual, Luke 12:14 or 2:14 or not, it doesn't matter. We've all heard the line before, glory to God in the highest and peace on earth. Okay, so we want peace on earth. You hear it all the time. We want peace on earth. Every beauty contestant, I want peace on earth. Right? That's Luke 2:14. Now, that's not the end of the quote. No one ever quotes the second part of the sentence. Always be careful of ellipses. If you're reading someone, often in the media, you'll see the beginning of a quote, then some ellipses and the rest of the quote. Sometimes you'll see two sets of ellipses in a quote, and you know that's totally fraudulent. If someone throws in an ellipses, they're probably hiding something. Of equal sin here is the ending of a sentence in the middle of the sentence. That's what's happening here. Luke 2:14 says, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom he is pleased. Doesn't say peace on earth. It says peace on earth among those with whom he is pleased. Uh-oh, that's different. What does that mean? We're going to talk about that on my podcast, Politics by Faith. We'll talk also about the importance of Israel and the Bible and what should our role be as Americans or as Christians be to the Jewish people and to the state of Israel. And then also peace on earth among those with whom he is pleased. What does that mean in our context today? More on that on my podcast, Politics by Faith. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Hope to see you over there. Mike Slater, First TV. Spread the word.